A review group led by one of Scotland's most senior judges has recommended that a new specialist court should be created to deal with serious sexual offences. Now, the recommendations from Lord Justice Clerk Lady Dorrian are aimed at making the experience for victims less traumatic. Now, the report recommends the use of pre-recorded evidence so that victims don't need to keep repeating traumatic stories. A new specialist court will be set up so judges, prosecutors and defenders would get training to deal with vulnerable witnesses. And the most dramatic suggestion was a pilot where cases would be heard only by a judge with no jury. Now, I asked Lady Dorrian to explain more about her report and the reasoning behind it.
The main recommendation is for a specialist court to deal with all serious cases of sexual assault or any other sexual offences, and that court should be staffed by individuals who have had particular training, trauma-informed training, from the judges all the way down through all the participants, and that there should be, in addition to that, as a default feature of the court, that the evidence of complainers in sexual cases should be captured on video in advance of the trial, well in advance of the trial.
One of the most eye-catching, some would say controversial, things that you put forward as a suggestion is that some trials could be done not by juries but by judges. What is the thinking behind that? Do you basically not trust juries to always give the right verdict in some of these very sensitive cases?
The reasoning behind that was that we are dealing with, in this review, we're dealing with the problem about how these cases are managed that has been with us for many, many years. And we keep having similar discussions about them. And in the course of our discussions, we looked at other options for dealing with these cases other than juries, and considered that this was a subject that needed to be examined further. So we're not recommending that juries should be abolished for these cases. We're simply saying that's a conversation that needs to take place and needs to be informed by public discussion.
And is that because you are worried that rape myths or preconceptions, I guess, are quite widespread among society?
It's because we feel that the idea that we simply carry on doing things the way that we have always been doing them isn't necessarily the best way forward. And if we're exploring the idea of a completely new court, we should be open to looking at all other options that could be available.
Well, it's interesting to hear one of the judges who's been quoted to say that in some of these sensitive cases where there's evidence of a quality and quantity which for any other kind of crime would lead to a conviction, I see a number of acquittals each year in rape cases which, to my mind, are not explicable by rational application of the law to the evidence. Is that something that you agree with?
That's one of the discussion points that featured in the course of the debate about the various options that were available, and was a view put forward in the course of debate which informed our eventual conclusion.
Do you think the current setup is perhaps biased against women in any way?
What we felt was that the current system required to be improved so that the complainers, men and women, found that the experience was less traumatic.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the idea of it being traumatic, the idea of going through the whole process of reporting, a violent crime or a rape against yourself. One of the former chief constables of Nottinghamshire Police told Women's Hour this week that she would hesitate before bringing anything forward. She would struggle, she said, to report a crime against herself because of what she described as the endless repeated humiliation. I mean, do you feel that too?
Well, one of the factors that we felt was necessary for us to look at was whether there were aspects of the way things are dealt with at the moment which did not assist complainers to move on from having the experience that they'd had, and which were capable of re-traumatization. One of the most common issues that arose in that discussion was that people felt having to give their account repeatedly was something which was capable of re-traumatizing them. And so we looked at whether we could start from a position that a court would adopt trauma-centered, trauma-based approaches, which would avoid that.
And we've seen such an outpouring of, grief and anger after the Sarah Everard death in the UK. Do you feel that now is the time to really start seriously looking in Scotland, but also in other parts of the UK as well, about how we deal with these crimes against women and girls?
Well, obviously, cases of murder would not be part of the remit of our review. We were dealing only with sexual offences. But one of the things that drove the review was the feeling that it was necessary to look at how these cases as a whole were managed and that we could do better.
And if you look at the conviction rates for rape and also sexual offences, they've always been pretty low, and it feels like they're getting worse. I mean, certainly in England and Wales, over the last 3 years, rape convictions more than halved. Do you think things are getting worse?
Well, we didn't proceed on the basis that the conviction rate was a driving factor in our report. We proceeded on the basis that what was necessary was to find a better way of managing the cases that avoided traumatization. We very specifically decided that we should not approach matters on the basis that there was any kind of appropriate conviction rate or that convictions should be a marker of success. So we adopted a completely different approach, which was simply to look at the experience of those who were complaining of sexual violence, women or men.
Has it been quite hard in your career to have seen the impact on some of these people who do come forward?
Yes, some of the accounts that we had that explained that people felt re-traumatized after their engagement with the criminal justice system was one that was difficult for us to hear, because clearly that is not the intention. And we had to listen to that and find a way of creating a system that would not do that.
Do you feel that rape has been effectively decriminalised in the UK because of the low conviction rates?
I don't think that's something that was within the review group's remit or that I can comment on. It's a crime that's taken very seriously, and it continues to be taken very seriously. And this review shows how seriously we intend to take it.
OK, thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on and explaining some of the details about the review as well.